Okay, good morning, good afternoon and good evening, whichever applies. I'm going to be going through a fairly simple process of making an object in Houdini. I'll show you what I'm going to be doing. Obviously you can do whatever you want to do. This section I've got a padoga here. This section is going to be gold. We're going to have some heat coming from this box that's going to kind of shoot up, and we want the heat from that to kind of melt this down a little bit. So yeah, first thing to note, particularly when moving from Maya to Houdini, check your scaling. So for example, in this scene we've got a whole set here. I know this is, this section of the roof is about a few meters wide. So something I've already done is I've gone in, I've imported this section here, I've separated just this bit that I wanted off from this model, brought it in, scaled it, and then saved it as a new geometry, and saved it in the geometry folder of my project. Similarly, rather than importing the entirety of this roof, which would just be a bit more intensive, I have separated out exactly where it's going to be colliding. So it's these bits of the roof and these kind of support beams, these support beams here. Yeah, brought those in, again scaled them down with this roof section and saved them as a new geometry, just because it means that when you're actually creating the collider, it's a lot less laggy, a lot less intensive when you're trying to sort it out. So first thing to do, obviously if you've not got a project set up, you would do new project, project path, find your project path. So third year, for me, tutorials, viscosity training, melting roof, and make it that way. Because I've already done that, I'll do set project and then go through the same process, tutorials, training, melting roof. Got all these files here, which are all the files that I'll need. So I'll go back, click melted roof, press accept. And then of course, the first thing you're going to want to do before you do anything, save as, and we'll do, as you can see, little tests here. We'll do melted roof. Okay, and doing that means that when we do the first step here, which is press tab, go into the node menu, press tab, type file, enter to place it, enter to go in. This creates a geometry node with a file already in it. It just means that it'll take me straight to this project path where I've got my geometry. These are the pieces that I was talking about earlier. So roof piece, which is what we're going to want to source for our fluid. We'll go back out, we'll name this roof. Same thing again, file, we're going to want to bring in our collider. Do that, Boolean collider. So this is a collider I made just using, again I brought these in, scaled these down, and then to make sure that this collider was exactly where I needed it to be, because in Maya here, they're kind of inside each other a little bit. Ooh. This isn't a perfect fit to this. So I just brought them into Houdini, Boolean them. Obviously it's very specific to your scene, but if you want to use these, I'll provide a link in the description. So let's rename this collider. So now we've got both of our pieces. First thing we're going to want to do, roof. Let's go in here and we're going to want to make a flip source. So type flip source, plug that in there. You might be thinking, well, why don't we use the shelf tools here? Flip fluid from object. The reason we don't do that is because if you do that, it's most of the time it's fine, but for example, the flip source that it would make, chuck that off of its tag, it will automatically have shell thickness enabled on either 0.1, which creates an area around your source object in which particles will be generated. Which again, for general fluid sim is fine if you're just testing things, but when you want something to be a precise shape and size, you want to make sure that's off. And doing this manually just ensures that. So then we're going to make a null. Again, tab, type null, enter, enter, place it down, plug it in. We're going to call this source out. Press L to clean that up. So now we've got a flip source. That's all fine, that's source flip, that's what we want. Let me go back out, and while we're in this main section, we're going to tab DOP, we're going to make a DOP network. And this is where all of our simulation and all of our simulation nodes are going to be. So we're going to make a flip solver, tab flip, down, flip solver, plug that into our output, and then we're going to want a flip object, enter, plug that into our first input on the flip solver, and you can see here the default cube being made as the flip object. We're going to want to source that to our roof output, our roof out. So we go to the SOP path, this little button here, go to our roof, open that up, and we, source out, I spelled that wrong, but you know, source out makes it easy to find. That's when we made our source. Let's go back and rename that because it will bug me. And because it's sourced to that, it doesn't matter about the spelling for that. And then we're going to want to make this a particle field. Input type particle field, it's all in the flip object. Go to guides, go to particles, and we don't want this to be sprites, we want this to be particles. So, visualization particles. Visualization particles, there we go. Can't speak. So that's cool. And then if we make a gravity force, put that just underneath our flip solver, everything that's getting made there, we'll then apply a gravity force to it, so that's Earth's gravity that's calculated there. So now I've got particles that fall. If you want to make sure it's in real time, just make sure this button's clicked, because if not, it will, just speed down. This just ensures everything's in real time. Go back. So that's good. Next step is we want to, if you look at this, we've got our voxel size, we've got particle separation, and similarly with our flip object, we've got particle separation here. So what we want to do, because if we go back to the beginning now and try to decrease the particle separation, which would mean that that's on not on default. To decrease the particle separation means that there'll be more particles in there because the distance between the particles is shorter. So if we made that 0.05, that should mean that there are more in there, but there isn't. That's because we need to go to our particle separation here in the DOP network, copy parameter, go to our roof, get our flip source, and then in the voxel size and particle separation here, we want to paste relative references. Paste relative references here as well. And what that does is that takes our parameter here and applies it here as well. So anything we do here, we'll apply it there. So now, make that 0.05. As you can see, much more particles, a bit more detail in the shape. And you can see the shell changing as well. So bring that to 0.1. See these squares are a little bit thicker. It's because it's applying it to that voxel size as well. Let's make that 0.4 for now. So we've still got some detail, but we can still sim it fairly quickly. Okay. So now we've got those particles. Let's untick the roof so we can just see the particles, the DOP network. Cool, but it's not colliding. Before we do anything with collision, we're going to make a geometry node. Go in, tab DOP, and make a DOP IO. With this, we want to go to our DOP network, which is here, our DOPnet. Let's close this. We want to make our DOP network the one DOP network we've got. DOP node, close that. We want our output. And then you don't need to worry about this too much yet. And then make sure in presets for the .io, we're putting flip fluid. This just means that now I can close the DOP network, make sure the view flag is off on it. I can just use this as a display flag. Let's call this DOP import. So now, yeah, that just shows us what's going on in here. Let's go back, and we need to make our collider. So for this, we can use shelf tools, collisions, static object, and now logically you think, okay, well, I should collide now. If you play that, oh, it's not colliding with this or these front bits of the roof, but it's colliding here. Why is that? Let's have a look in our DOP network. Okay, this is all a bit messy, so let's press L, clean it up. Go into our collider, scroll up, and if you go into our collisions here, and collision guide, it's using a solver default, so it's deciding which one it's going to use. So you can see here it's colliding with these blue squares, and that's because the division size of our volume collider, so the volume that it's creating for this geometry, is very low poly. We can fix that. We're going to be using surface collisions because they seem to work pretty well. But if you want to use volume collisions, which can be much better in other instances, we can move that down to 1. And you see, because I've made that change, but nothing's happened here, and that's because you see this turn orange. It's because that's made a change in the simulation. If you're not at the beginning of your timeline, it won't show a difference with the collision guide. So if we go back, give it a second, and you'll see now, if we untag the display geometry, these blue lines are now what's being created as the volume, but that's still not quite right. Again, this isn't what we're going to be using, so you can ignore this in some sense. It's just good to know is that not everything can be kind of determined by division size. But I can make that not 2. It's bigger, but it's not quite right. It's a little bit. What you're better off doing is taking the offset surface. So I'd say put that down to 0.015, and then it's still a little bit off. Offset surface by 0. Let's try 0.1. Bit thick. 0.0. Oh. 6. Oh, hold on. That was a tolerance. I'm a fool. 0.001. Not enough. 3. 4. A little bit better, and then maybe try this at 0.1. Maybe 0.8. Again, it's just kind of playing around and making sure that it works just about how you want it to. And then you've still got some of the shape in the roof tiles here, and you've got all the shape of the arches. But for us, we're just going to disable that, and rather than using solver default, we're going to use surface collisions. Go to surface, show collision radius, and you can see this just fits much better. You see it's kind of clipping in and out with the displayed geometry, which shouldn't be an issue, but for my kind of peace of mind, I prefer taking the collision radius 0.01, bit too big, so add another note in there, 0.001, and now you kind of see that's pretty much bang on, and there's no clipping, it just feels a little bit better. Okay, so now let's go back, let's play this simulation. Beautiful, so now they fall, they hit the arches, you can see it's kind of pooling in these gaps here a little bit. You can see these lines that have been created because of that collision. That's good. Now we want to add some viscosity. So first of all, let's go in. You actually want to make sure this is not being shown because it can lag your sim a fair bit. Let's go into our flip solver. Go to particle motion. Oh, not volume motion. Apologies. Go into our viscosity. enable viscosity and viscosity by attribute. Make sure viscosity by attribute is ticked. Also, while we're here, if you're wanting to add a UV to this, wanting to go down that path, you're going to want to turn your reseeding off. It's also good for us just because it means that it won't be recalculating every point. Because we also want to, if we add an ID attribute, it means each of these now, every particle that is in here is, final. It's just going to be these particles that are created in the sim. It's not going to be recalculating anything, which just makes identifying them later on, if you want to go down that path, a little bit easier. So volume motion, viscosity is on. Let's go back. Go into our roof, and then underneath our flip source, rather than messing with the viscosity in the parameters anywhere, we're gonna, for this method, make an attribute. So tab attribute, or just wrangle. We're gonna make an attribute wrangle. Put this in between our flip source and our out null, and we're gonna do a very simple vex expression of at viscosity equals, let's go 1000 for now, semicolon to finish it off. Make sure I spelled it right. Yep, beautiful. Yeah, 1000 for now. So now if we go back and we play this, yeah, you see it's a little bit more goopy, a little bit more goop-like, and it's kind of dripping down here. But we don't actually want the main viscosity to be done here. For this, I want this to be actually 100,000 rather than 1,000. So let's add 2 extra zeros on there. Now what I've done there is I pressed enter automatically, so it's messed up the vex expression. Go back to that, that's fine. That's beautiful. Now that will just sit still. If you want it to have a little bit of movement, so we're going to be creating a box and moving the box up, which will control where the viscosity is. So actually, let's do that now. Go into our dock network. Let's move these just to the, come to that, to the side a bit. Tap the tab keyboard on your, tap the tab key on your keyboard. Made that way more difficult than it needs to be. SOP and SOP solver. Enter, enter, that's in. Plug that into your sourcing, so the fourth input on your flip solver. Let's go in. What we're going to do here, let's just go back to the beginning of our sim. Tab, we're going to make a group. So tab group. And we're not going to use the base group, we're not going to use what it's plugged into, we're going to use our bounding regions. And this creates a little bounding box. We can bring that out here. We want the melting to be going on at this front section. This box is what's going to be determining what's got a lower viscosity than everything else. So we're going to make this a little bit wider, just as wide as our object. A bit wider, a bit longer as well. And we're just going to animate that. Before we do that, we want to make sure that the group type is not on primitives, it's on points. Then we're going to Alt-click center to create a keyframe. And then we want it to be a fairly slow process, so let's bring it out to 312, I think. Alt-tab again to create another keyframe, and then let's just bring that up here. You can see because it's on, if this was on primitives, I bring this up here, it won't do anything because it's not looking for points, the points that are being made in the simulation. So put this to points, move this up, you can see it's selecting all of them. So let's put this up here. That takes about half, almost half of it. That's fine. From there, we want to make another attribute wrangle, just there. Before we do it, let's just have a look at our animation. Yep, so that's kind of slow going, nothing at the start. Let's maybe fix that. Let's maybe make it just on the edge. So we've got, a few seconds of nothing, and then, start bringing it in. Beautiful. We've got our attribute wrangle. Let's plug this in here. Now we want to do the same vex expression we did before at viscosity equals, and for now let's just do 20 just to get the point. This won't be the final value, but it'll let us see the effects. And then we're going to make sure we put an output. I've done this before where go through this process, forget to do an output, you won't do it. And also with the attribute wrangle, you want to make sure that it's calling from group 1. So if you've this group 1, if you've named it, it wants to be whatever that name is, but that will show up here. That just means that it'll only apply this expression to whatever is in this group. So it won't apply it to any of these points I just pointed out on the screen, as if you could see it. It won't apply it to any of these that are outside of it, but these ones that are highlighted, it will. So if we now go back, let's go back to the beginning so it's not cooking anything, and we play our sim. See, nothing's really moving. See, there's some slight movement because they are simming. It's just that it's so viscous that it's holding its shape. As it gets up, as the box moves up to the point, there we go. So it's reached it, and now these points are now falling. Bit of a slow process because we've animated it to be a little bit slow, just so it looks a little bit nicer. But I don't know if you can really notice, but it's a little bit neat in terms of where it's kind of cutting out in the liquid. If you stop that, let's just have a look at this in real time. Get a quick idea for it. And it's also very liquidy. I'd like it to be a little bit more. I'd like it to be less neat in terms of where it's cutting off, and I want it to be a little bit more viscous. I don't want it to be instantly turning to liquid. So let's go back into our subsolver. First of all, instead of having a bounding box, let's do a bounding sphere. Let's go back, let's reset the sim so it's not falling. We can see it. I don't know why it's doing that. But yeah, this just makes it a little bit more of a curve. It makes it look a little bit more natural, and it curves this, this back section rather than being a straight line all the way up. Let's actually make this a little bit bigger. Let's go back to the beginning just to make sure that's evened out. Make that look a little bit bigger. Make it a little bit more even. And let's actually, just for the sake of time, let's bring this a little bit more forward, just so we're not waiting for ages in the sim or for this tutorial. So to do that, let's just make sure this is selected. Press Alt, Shift, and F to bring up the animation editor. This is all these center animation points here. Let's bring this forward a little bit by clicking the bar. And now they're all at 240 rather than 312. So now that box should be a little bit. Even that's a little bit slow. Yeah, so let's actually, because the sphere is, this is the actual sphere. It's using a box just for ease of use. Let's just put it here. So we've got nothing, and then it should kind of bring it in and start doing it. Beautiful. Do that, yeah, now we can see. Can we see? Strange, I'm not sure why it's doing that. It should be okay though. So to make it a little bit more viscous so it's not immediately melting to almost water, let's maybe put it up to, we'll try 1000 and see how that looks. See, I've come back out to the dock network while I'm halfway through the timeline, so it was cooking that then. If you want to cancel that, you can just press escape while it's doing that. I've come back out, so now it's using the import so we can see it. Play it through, let's have a look how it's going. Is it catching them? Yes it is. It's just a little bit, because it's a little bit, maybe that's a bit too viscous. Oops, sorry. Yeah, maybe that's a little bit too goopy. So let's cancel that. Let's have a quick look at it as well in real time, just to double check, because things in sim time and real time sometimes look quite different. Yeah, it's a little bit too goopy for me. So let's go back, subsolver, let's put that to, let's try 600. Oh, that's 60,000. Let's not do that. Go back. Wait for it to sim out, see how it goes. See, as annoying as it is that kind of having to wait for it to reach that section, I'm happy with that. It is worth having that introductory bit for this before it starts getting into the main sim, just because, you know, when you're editing, it's good to have that buffer point. I'm a bit happy with that. Cool. Done that. So you see this goofy bit. It's dripping down. It's falling down here. Our shot is going to be somewhat like this. It's going to be this kind of angle. So we're not actually going to see those. If you're getting a wide angle, if you want something like this, you could put a ground plane. You move these up, put a ground plane in, or move the ground plane down to wherever your floor is going to be, and that would look okay. But because we're not doing that, it would be this kind of shot. We're instead going to go into our DOP network, click our flip solver, and if we zoom out, you can see we've got this box, and this is a bounding box. So any particles that fall out of here will not be simulated, they'll be killed, they'll be deleted. So we're going to take this bottom section, this bottom line, and we're going to bring it up to about where our grid is. So let's say like there. The issue with it being so big, we can make it smaller, we don't need it to be that big, to be fair. Sorry if you can hear my mouse wheel aggressively scrolling. Let's just bring it in just so it's a little bit easier to work with. Bring this in here. Yeah, it's good. Bring this down here. What I did there is I just pressed space shift H and it will center the camera on whatever you're selecting. Yes, that's a little bit easier to work with. That's still a little bit lower down than we really need it to be. So bring it to about there. And now if we play this sim out, it just means that now, again, we're going to be having this kind of angle. So if you've planned your angle out and you know what you're going to be seeing and what you're not seeing, it's good to always just make sure it's as streamlined as it can be, and that any particles that aren't going to get seen do get deleted, because it just means that your cache, when we eventually cache this out, it's going to be a lot quicker. Because now if we have a look at this, and these fall, yeah, and they just get deleted on that line, which is fine for us because we're going to be looking at it kind of like this. Can we see it at the bottom there? We can't, but if we did, we could just always move it down. So yeah, that's all good. You can just play with that and get the until you get kind of the desired effect that you want. Let's have a look at this in real time. I'm quite happy with that. If you have a look at the slide, it's quite nice. Again, having this sphere makes it look a bit more natural because we've got the, if we go into the stop solver, look at the group. Because it's a sphere, it's kind of naturally leading back there with that simple animation, kind of mimicking heat kind of reaching the back. We don't need to worry about too much about this back section. A small detail as well, if you really wanted it, is if we go into our .NET, I believe it's in flip solver, yeah, in our viscosity, slip-on collision. This isn't completely necessary really, but if you want to have, you can see it's not really moving in this initial section. If you want it to kind of have the feel of it's starting to get hot, and so the entire thing is starting to melt and it's just that the heat is attacking this front section mostly, we can turn on slip-on collision. If we play this now, you can see it kind of, the entire thing kind of moves down a little bit, and that's because it's taking any particles that are colliding, it's making those a little bit slippier. So everything that's touching something is sliding down. So as much as the liquid is actually viscous, the entire thing is going down a little bit more now. I would turn that down, I would turn that to 0.05, let's try. And as you can see, it's just a very subtle little thing that it could add a little bit of something. Let's leave it on for now. See it sim out, see how it looks, and then we can decide whether we want it or not. If you really want to see it and compare properly, you can always do a flipbook with new sayings. And we're not going to bother because I feel fairly happy with how it is, but they're quite good for. Let's do a flipbook actually, let's do a 216. It'll render that out a little bit. Takes a second, but it does get there. I do forget that the flipbook will just capture whatever's in the viewport, so we're actually seeing the box for the flip solver, which could be a bit annoying, but for now it's fine. Yeah, just in case you need to know how to make a flipbook and how useful they can be. Because we've already pre-rendered these, it is just doing this fairly simply. Once it hits that point, it is going to start calculating up to here. Because we've got a fairly low resolution particle sim, it's not too bad. But now it's just much easier to scrub the timeline, and if you want, you can file, export that as a video, and then again you can change parameters, test, have a look at the different effects. Do one with slip-on collision off, slip-on collision on. Up to you. For now, I'm quite happy with how this looks. I'll probably turn slip-on collision down just a touch, half that, 0.025. Just so we've got a little bit of movement, but not much. Have we turned the reseeding off? Listen. Oh. Doing all sorts now. Particle motion reseeding. We have. Okay, perfect. So yeah, I'm fairly happy with how this is looking. A little bit of movement from the slip-on collision, not much. Enough that it kind of feels like it's the entire thing is heating up. But the majority of the heat will hit that front bit as this falls down. So once you're happy with that, you want to go into the DOF network, go to our flip object, and we want to, before we cache anything out, so what we'll do is we'll make a file cache here. Let's just set up for a few minutes from now. Make a file cache. Wherever we want to put it, let's say, like I said, because we set a project, it takes us straight to our geo file here. As you can see, I've been testing this previously. Let's do melted roof 4. Oh, I've made a mistake there though, because we want to go back, copy this file extension here, go here, melted roof 4, and paste that file extension, enter to accept, and that should be all good. Before we do that, before we kind of finalize it, we want this to be much higher resolution, because this is fine. We found out 0.04 just to work with the sim. We want to get that more to about, let's try, before we mess with that, let's go back to the beginning of the scene so it's not changing it and then messing around with it. Let's try 0.01. That's hefty. We probably don't need that much, so let's try 0.015. I'm happy with that, because we're keeping the shape without it being too, if we look at this, oh, 0.01, that's really quite dense, and it may be more dense than we really need. So 0.05. Try that. Yeah, I think that should be okay. So we can, yeah, you see we've got the shape of the roof. So what you want to do then, go into your DOP import, go to your file cache. Do we want to do it to 480? Suppose 480. Let's do it to, we'll do it to 360. So if we want to get rid of that, because if we try to change that now, 360, it'll, alright, we'll do it. But if you want to get rid of that green line, let's do 360. You just right click, and then delete channels. I don't know what I've done here. Ah, I clicked that by accident. So yeah, do that, and then we've got our file path sorted out. We want that to be writing files there. We can play this out, and it should do the same thing, but I like to just make a meal of it and click save to disk, and then that will bring this up and it will go through that process. You'll want to do that and wait till it finishes. I've already got one, so I'll interrupt that. And what I'll do is I will take that, do melted roof 2, I'll call that in. So I'm going to go in, I'm going to bypass all of this by going in, selecting them all and clicking this little yellow arrow here, bypass. It just means that if I am messing around with anything and if I accidentally go into here, or I need to go into here to mess with it, to forget anything, it's not going to sim everything out. We want that to read files, load from disk. And now we've got one that I've already done, so yours should look something similar. If I play this out, the actual sim might be a little bit different. Oh, let's try a different one. It's clearly not working. Let's see how this goes. Yeah, so that's one that I've done already. And it goes to frame 420, 430. So, that's why this one 430 before. That makes sense. So let's work with this one. Yours might have I think I've got slip-on collision disabled for this one, so you can actually see a difference. You might see a difference on yours. If you do, that's fine. That's fine. So let's then bring in. We can do it two ways. We can bring in a particle fluid surface and plug that right into here, or if you want to kind of get rid of these, you can get rid of the .io, because we can just use the file cache, or we can just delete both of those and use a file and bring in. They both work fine. But I would say just keep what you've got, so you've got reference. You can go back and try use them later on. Particle surface. So if you look at this, you'll see the particle surface is nothing like what we've got here in our file cache. Our particles here. That's because of the particle separation. So what I said about bypassing these, it's just good because it means now I can go into here without worrying about it trying to sim anything. Take our particle separation, copy our parameter. Let's go back to our DOP import. Just L to clean up a little bit. Go to particle separation, same as we did before, paste relative references. And now if we look, yeah, there we go. It's a little bit neater. See, it's dripping off the side there. It will be quite laggy because this isn't cached. It's every frame it is simulating what's there. Yours might melt a little bit earlier than mine. It likely will do. That's fine. Let's just go to frame 1. Just a little bit more even. And you can see it's a little bit bumpy. So what we're going to do to fix that is we're going to go into our particle fluid surface, go to filtering, tick smooth, and you see that fixes it a little bit. And then there's also tick final smooth. That makes it much better. You can up these values. So maybe put that to 4. And put that to 4. You see that's much smoother than this. This looks much better. And then that's pretty much okay. If you want to get a quick look at how it would look with the gold, let's do that. Make that a little bit darker. Oh, we've done it again. Done something silly. There we go. Let's walk that on there. So that's the idea of what it looked like gold. Let's skip ahead. Yours might be a bit different. Any parameters, but that's kind of melting at the front as it goes. yeah, so that's kind of that's melting down now and falling. And again, we've got some, as if the heat's kind of reaching back here, but it's not destroying this, so it's not as messy. So yeah, once you're happy with that, have a look through. And once you're okay with how that looks, you can, same thing here, let's just make a new file cache. And then, if you have done this, and this might be a bit late to say, but if you're doing this and you've got these kind of wireframe things all over it, you can just smooth shade it, and it just looks a bit better. It gives you more of an idea as to what is going on. You can see it down here. It means nothing is calculated down here when we did the bounding box before, which is even more important now because it would be then trying to mesh everything falling down here. It would just be a much slower process. We've got file cache 2 on me. Same process. Let's go. Melted roof for surface. Let's go surface mesh. Actually, rather than doing that, let's just do it this simple way. Copy that. Melted roof for surface mesh. Paste. Accept. And then yeah, you can file mode, write files. Then you can save to disk. So we did it to 430. And we saw. Right click, delete channels. 430. And then same process as this. We just file cache. That's the beginning. And save to disk. I won't do that right now because that's pretty much it. You've got yourself a little melted roof that you can then render out, mess with the material palette for, bring it into your scene, and then it would be a case of bring this in here. Then that should fit nicely in there. Fall into here and fall down. Yeah, if we just save to disk now. Now that will go through the process of calculating each of those meshes, and yeah, that's pretty much it. I'll check back with you just when this is cached out so you can see how it looks. Yeah, see you then. So that's finished caching out. If we play that now, see there's little bits of artifacting there. Overall, you get this effect of the front section melting and falling down. I think it could just be a case of going back and, yeah, you see it's all falling down and then it goes all the way to the back. It could just be a case of upping the particle separation in the sim, going back and, you know, just testing the parameters of it, making sure it all kind of looks okay. Yeah, that's a kind of simpler method of controlling the melting of an object in Houdini. Hope you enjoyed. Cheers.